This is Dr. Andrew Sargent. Welcome to The Man Behind the Curtain. Today we're going to begin talking about corporate personality and corporate solidarity. We're looking at 12 concepts of God, man, and reality. So the major theme in talking about God is to understand the nature of holiness, and we spend a lot of time talking about that. Then when you talk about man, there's a lot of theology about man, just like there's a lot of theology about God. But in this class, we're unpacking concepts about God, man, and reality that underpin all the theology of Scripture, are never explained in Scripture, and are foreign to the Western world. That's the criteria for what shows up in this as opposed to what does not show up in this class. And so today we move on to man, and we're going to talk about man as a corporate entity. And the next step is to talk about the nature of reality. And we're going to look at two aspects of reality. It's going to be analogical and dialogical thinking patterns. And we're going to talk about chaos conf. Chaos conf. Now, under the umbrella of chaos conf, all the other stuff in the class comes. Everything else falls under the umbrella of chaos conf. The nature of how the ancient Near Eastern world organized itself into a society of chaos conf, and the role the king and the rulers played in organizing society to fight that fight, and how the pagans fought it, which is radically different from how the Jews fought it, because the Jewish view of the world, the Jewish view of God, the Jewish view of man, Jewish view of reality is so radically different than what's going on in the pagans. We really want to get our head around corporate personality and corporate solidarity. You perhaps have heard of this. Anybody ever hear this idea? You've heard of these concepts before, other than from me? No. Oh. Okay. I was like, are there people out there talking about this? I want to meet them. There is, actually. When we talk about corporate personality, corporate solidarity, we're getting at the core of what it means to be man. For instance, if I had a jar and there was a single bee in it, and that bee does not have a hive, what's the bee's situation? Can a single bee live? Can a single bee do anything, accomplish anything, have any meaning or purpose left to it if its hive is gone? Nothing. The bee finds the very essence of itself in its hive. No hive, no bee. Americans have a tendency to be on the opposite side of this kind of conception from the corporate. So we recognize that there are individual bees, but we also recognize that the only function or hope that any individual bee has is in serving its function within the corporate whole. And any bee that breaks from its paradigm, any bee that breaks from what it's supposed to be doing, is dead. The ancient Near East conceives of people very much the way we would conceive of the bee. It's a big part of the sense of what it means to be a human being. You can even ask yourself that question. An individual person in the wild, how many could survive? How long could you live alone if I dropped you in the woods?
Right now?
In the north.
20 minutes?
In the forest, in the jungle. I dropped you, took you to Madagascar and dropped you in the jungle. How long are you going to live? So we're all going to recognize that these macho men who want to live off the grid are still radically dependent on society, because they're dependent on things they learned in society. They're dependent on the things that they get from society, which enable them to live in the wild. The tents, the tools, even just the skills for how to build a house. Yeah. Everything was gained in the corporate whole. When we get down to the end of this conversation, we're going to run through a series of oddities in Scripture that Western people look at and go, huh? What? That's weird. Like you've got Abraham, right? And God says, oh, Abraham, I'm going to make your children like the stars of the heavens, and you won't see any of it. And Abraham's, that's so awesome! You will see one of them.
Yeah.
You'll be dead before the second one comes along. But trust me, it's going to be awesome. Right? And Abraham's thrilled to death. And I might be like, well, that's nice. Thanks, God. Would it thrill my soul? I'm not going to get to see in it. I'm not going to taste any of it. I'm going to give you this whole territory, and you'll never own any of it, except for one little piece that you get ripped off on in order to try and bury your wife. He's like, awesome, God, thank you so much. I'm just overjoyed. Right?
Right.
That's not the way we think, but that's the way they think. So we're going to look at a series of practical implications for how to understand various things that are happening in Scripture based on the corporate identity of man. Man is individual, but man is corporate. Now, here's the radical thing. In the ancient world, everybody was corporate. The closest you got to anything that resembled independent thinking or individualism is among the Greeks. And the right of the citizen and the duty of the citizen. It was still bound to the corporate, but you get a little closer to this kind of individualism. But here's the radical thing. Individualism comes from Scripture. It is Scripture that takes the corporateness of the ancient world and begins to poke at it and cause to emerge out of the corporateness of Scripture a competing individualism. And when I'm in India, and I'll come and I'll say, Jesus said this. And they go, oh, Western man, don't come over here with your individualism trying to lecture us. And I go, okay. Jesus, your Eastern Lord, told you, boom, there, take that for your individualism, right? Because there's going to be a radical stirring up of the hornet's nest, of the corporateness, with certain aspects like individual salvation, like choosing Jesus over mother and father. You know, all of a sudden, it's me choosing God and the way of God, though everybody in my association drive me out and kill me. It's going to shake it up. He's going to come in and he's going to say things. Every man will die for his own sin. The son shall not die for the sin of the father, unless he shares in the sin of the father. And we go, well, what about Achan's family? Well, we already kind of talked about that. All that Achan's family had to do, and we know this because this is what happened with Rahab, all that they had to do was to break faith with their father, go to the elders of Israel, and say, I love my dad, I disagree with what he's doing, I'm with God, not with him. And they would have lived. We know this because when Rahab was confronted with being part of a corporate entity that was destined for harem slaughter, she broke faith with her people, chose on behalf of the Lord, and was saved. And not only that, everybody she stuffed in her house got saved too. So you see these kinds of weird things. So like at one point when it says every man shall die for his own sin, and we actually have people pushing back at the prophet saying that's not fair, that's not right, because they're so corporate minded they can't imagine that a son should not be punished for the sins of the father. Now here's a very weird thing which you probably have not considered. Political leftism is corporate. It acts and preaches itself in setting the individual free from the morals and traditions of society. But it is corporate 100%. You have no meaning. Your only purpose is to become a cog in destroying civilization in order to bring the new corporate world, the new world order, in which everybody receives their marching orders from the Übermensch, the great one. It's totalitarian. They always call themselves democracies. I don't personally like Trump as an individual. I'm not going to vote for him because I like him or dislike him. I'm going to vote for him whether I think he can do what's right for the country and put us in the right direction we need to. I'm playing chess, not checkers. But they're always screaming. They're always screaming, Trump is a threat to our democracy. Trump is a threat to our democracy. And when you see what they actually want to do, you have to ask yourself, what in the world do they mean by democracy? The word democracy means the rule of the people. They do not believe in the rule of the people. They believe in a powerful central government governed by the one, governed by a corporate elite, in which all the decisions of society are being made by a few at the very top and are being bled down to everybody else, in which everybody in civilization is forced to follow the marching orders that have been coded for them, written for them, for somebody above them. And no matter what they promise, that's never what they deliver. And so this is fascinating because as we move forward, it really has a lot of implications for how we read the Scripture, but also for how we think about our own existence, our own life. All right, so we recognize that man is an individual, but he's also part of a corporate whole. I think we can all recognize that, right? Mm-hmm. You're part of a family, you're part of a society, you're part of a community. You would not survive dumped in the middle of the woods by yourself unless your society had specifically trained you for the purposes. I don't.
Even then.
Even then,
Yeah.
have any of you read The Hatchet?
You don't read anything.
Yeah. I feel like we had to read it in school.
So you have The Hatchet, and then you get to follow up The River. Worth reading. It's this concept of this kid who's going up to the far north to visit his father, and the pilot has a heart attack and crashes in a lake in the far north. And he has to battle the wild, but he is determined to survive, determined to stay alive, learning from his mistakes, some of which could have killed him, but fortunately it didn't. It's literally one of those things, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger and smarter. He almost gets trampled to death by a moose. He has to battle all the wild animals. The mosquitoes will just about do him in until he learns that mosquitoes will not touch him if he's soaked in mud. All right. Few would survive alone in the wild, and those who could do so based on the knowledge they gained about the world while still among others. The one and the many are always held in tension, favoring one side or the other to one degree or another wherever human beings pull. So every single society recognizes that there are individuals and recognizes that there is a corporation, a groupness to us. You are going to lean toward the individual or you're going to lean toward the corporateness, but every society has both. And societies that are heavily corporate have a way about how they get things done. It actually shapes their cultures. So for instance, I think it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. I think they were in China, and they were trying to run an Employee of the Month program. It was a miserable failure. Nobody wanted to be the Employee of the Month. Nobody. That was the worst thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
To stick out, to be in competition with your fellow workers, and to stand out above them. You became a target, a hated thing.
Yeah.
Everybody would work diminished. And so then they called on this guy from Chicago, who's kind of, this is what he does. He helps corporations work in other cultures. And he goes, oh no, that's a corporate society. That's a collectivist society. You can't have Employee of the Month. He's going, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have Team of the Month. And you're going to get a group of people that will always work together. And they will be a team. And they're always a team, and the competition is going to be with other teams. All of a sudden, productivity through the roof, because they struck on what they want. If you're in India, for instance, is the highest authority structure in the world, right? It's their sense of belonging to a corporate group in which the group has a head, and that head is all powerful, and you do not contradict the head. You don't even think unless the head tells you to think. So we're driving on some streets, and one of our drivers is not very good, and he loses control of the Jeep, and he ends up in a mud field. And so I get out, and I look at it, and everyone's buzzing around, and of course we have the bishop with us. The bishop's, 78, 90, who knows? You can ask the man his age 50 times, you'll get 50 different answers.
Yeah.
And he seemed to be some kind of a funny game he was playing with, never being able to tell you when he was born. Because you know what's through this? He doesn't know when he was born. He has no idea when he was born. He was born sometime in the 30s. So it's all we're pretty sure of. So he's the oldest one in the group. So I look over, and I see that everybody looks a little confused. They don't know how to get this truck out of the mud. Well, we are next to a construction site, so I'm like, no problem. I'll have the truck out of the mud in 5 minutes. And I go, all right, so what we need is, and everybody goes, shh. The bishop will do it. The bishop will do it? The bishop can barely walk. The bishop will do it? He looks the most confused of anybody. He has absolutely no idea how to get this thing out of the mud. Oh, don't say that. So we all sit. And we sit. And we sit. And we sit. And every 15, 20 minutes I go, are you sure we can? Shh, no, the bishop will do it. So it takes him 2 hours to get that thing out of the mud. And they develop a system that is the most convoluted, ridiculous. They eventually get it out of the mud, but I'm like, I could have had us out of the mud in literally 10 minutes. Yeah. We were next to a construction site. Everything you could possibly need to get out of the mud is sitting like right there. Nope. And so I talked to the bishop's son later, telling him about the event. And I said, I felt bad for your dad. I said, it was obvious that everybody was leaning on him to solve a problem he didn't know how to solve. And everybody must have just been going bananas. And he went, oh no, you were the only one going bananas. You were the only one who was thinking about it. Everybody else has learned to turn their brain off. He goes,
That's weird.
they're part of a corporate. And the job has been given to the leader, and they don't need to think about it. And they won't think about it. And they won't get frustrated. And they will just go, and that's it. So we had a situation in Malaysia where you had the pilot and the co-pilot. And in the corporateness of the plane, and because corporate also means authority structure. You don't just have a corporate of equals. No, it's very hierarchical. So the pilot was so far above the co-pilot that the co-pilot could not bring himself to correct the pilot when he made a mathematical error in setting the altimeter of the plane. And they have recovered the black box, which as you can tell is a bad sign. And you can see that the co-pilot is attempting to get the pilot to reconsider how he set the altimeter of the plane. Because he's about 200 feet off. And he knows it. But he cannot bring himself to correct the pilot. Cannot bring himself to challenge him because of where he sits on the corporate ladder. And so they crash into the side of the mountain. And in spite of the fact that he knows they're going to crash into the side of the mountain, he still, they said it's painful to listen to the black box. He cannot bring himself to do it. So they had to go and take all their pilots and do a special retraining of them to defy their culture that when you're in that cockpit, you have a job to do, and your job is to correct the pilot if the pilot makes a mistake. That's your job. That's what you've been hired to do. He makes a mistake, you notice the mistake, you work it out, and you open your big mouth, and you don't just sit there and die and kill everybody on the plane, because you literally cannot bring yourself to say, hey, moron, you're off by 200 feet. So,
Was this
I believe it was Malaysia.
Malaysia.
Yeah.
That's wild.
The same country that they had the missing plane that they've still, I don't know if they've ever recovered. Found it.
I'm sure it's a coincidence.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, that happened how many years ago?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Outside of mountain.
They never found the plane. Gone. Yeah.
So you'll have
Yeah.
all kinds of elements of a culture from down to how do you accomplish work? Do you work cooperatively or competitively? And does competitive or cooperative get you the best results? And the answer can actually be shocking at how successful competitiveness can be as long as everybody is working for the good of the group. If you're trying to sabotage everybody else so that you can get ahead and trying to... So I'm reading a book right now on life in North Korea from a journalist who went undercover there pretending to be and they had hidden cameras on them, so even when they were checking their cameras, the one guy had a big camera on his neck that was supposed to be taking photos, only it wasn't. He would take some photos to make it look good, but it was actually filming everything, and the thing never turned off. But every time once in a while, they'd get mad at him and make him take pictures off the camera. So he'd go, "Oh, okay," and he'd erase pictures. It didn't matter. Thing's filming everything, right? Wow. So so then he did a BBC special, and then he wrote this book because North Korea tried to sabotage. So at one point, he's got these two people that are attempting to get a certain honor, and they're in school together, and they both want to be like top place. And so he's telling the story how one of them asked to borrow his book, his friend's book, and he went through the book and started writing hateful things about the kid. And then he thanked him for letting him borrow the book, gave it to him, and then called the secret police. So they go into the guy's house, they open the book, and they find all these writings, and they put the entire family in the North Korean gulags.
How long ago was this?
Guy wrote the book 10 years ago. So he was hearing the story. And when he was interviewing the person who did this to them, he thought it was hilarious. He was removing competition. That kind of cutthroatness does not. So you kind of get this balance where zero competition does not do well. But too much competition, cutthroatness, doesn't. Okay, so again, the one and the many. How are we going to balance and live out the one and the many? And these are going to become real important as we dig through the scriptures. The problem is that people rarely articulate their ideas about exactly how this is supposed to work. This is one of those things you just kind of feel it. What's the right thing to do on the job? Tell me, what is the right thing to do? What is the right balance of competitiveness and cooperation? How exactly should you feel as a child in a home before your parents, when your parents are trying to shape a life for you to live? How much do you push back? What's the right amount? What's the wrong amount? They want you to be a lawyer. And you want to sing. Monty Python.
They were funny. They were funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you recognize it. I want to sing. Okay, all right.
Good.
Monty Python.
Need to bring it more often.
So, so in the Holy Grail, this swamp lord is trying to marry his son off to the daughter of another lord, and to quadruple the size of his kingdom, right? And he's trying to get his son, but his son goes, "I don't want to get married." "Well, what do you want to do then?" I want to sing." And he goes, "Oh, no singing here. This is not a musical." All right. Very funny scene. Very funny scene. Anyway. So nobody's talking about it. They're just feeling it. They just know what the right thing to do and what the right thing to be is. And that you find people that they are internally wired in such a way that they cannot act against it any more than that co-pilot could speak to the pilot and say, "Hey, moron, you're off by 200 feet. We're going to hit a mountain." He cannot make himself do it, even though they're all going to die. Because you've got this kind of... He's not sitting there thinking to himself, "Well, I should tell him, and if I don't, well, we're all dead. But you know what? I don't think I'll do it." He literally cannot make himself do it. Because it's not happening on the level of the mind, it's happening on the level of cultured instinct. I've been trained to be this way. I think I talked about two girls that I went to high school with, whose parents had notified them that they would never be getting married. Because they were going to need them around the house when they got older to start doing everything for them.
Wow.
And so they were just going to not have to get married. And so one of them comes in, she's boo-hooing, and we're like, "When you turn 18, go do what you want." No. Oh, no, this is in America.
Oh.
It's really weird. This is Cuckoo Town. All right, so we're like, "What's your problem? When you turn 18, leave." "My parents wouldn't like it." So? And the one sister was trying to get up the gumption. You're right. When I turn 18, I will leave home." But her sister was like, "I could never do it. I'll just have to take care of them. I'll get married after they die."
Oh my gosh.
And she just died, by the way.
The
The weak one. One of the girls.
She
The
just
weaker
died?
one. She just died.
What about the parents?
I don't know.
Still kicking.
I don't know. I know the other sister is still alive, but I don't. But this one I just got a notification that she just passed away.
How
Should
old
get
was she?
married?
She was 56.
Oh, yeah. That's enough.
Yeah, a year younger than me.
Wow.
All right. So concepts of the one and the many, and exactly how that balance is supposed to work, are not happening on the level of mental examination. There's no mathematical formula that you're putting to it. It is woven into your being at such a gut level that it's literally, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's just the way it is. And for people who don't do it that way, like people who look at the West and hear about the way we govern our families or the way we work, the way we get things done, they're horrified. Horrified. And at times, perhaps they should be. There are things that we do that are perhaps horrific. But they're not asking questions of efficiency. They're asking questions about, why aren't you doing what is obviously right? Why are those people over there thinking differently about this than I'm doing? How could children grow up, go to school, and travel across the country and leave their parents behind?
Yeah. They have children roaming the streets in garbage cans, you know.
In certain places.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so they're
There's breakdowns of it, because
Yeah.
one of the things that I've found in the corporate ladder of the places that have a very strong authority structure, where you could never even think to resist those who are above you, is everybody acts like, well, the corporate life is the unselfish life. That's not true. Your father's Dominican, so he's going to have a certain instinct about this. Whether he passes that instinct on to you guys is another question. You look like you have something you want to say.
No, I'm just thinking about my dad. My dad is a special one.
Some of what you might be calling the special is this gut level, marrow deep instinct about how the corporate is supposed to function, how the corporate is supposed to work. And being raised in a society where your family has one idea about the corporate, but society has a different idea of the corporate, can create a great deal of issues for second generation. So with the Koreans, the South Koreans. So every university that I've been to, teaching or otherwise, has had a massive number of foreign students. One school literally had 140 countries represented in it. I have friends in almost every country of the world. I don't know anybody from North Korea. Other than North Korea, yeah, I got a lot of them covered, just from all the different universities I've been to. You'll find that some groups come together and blend well. They come from over there, and they, even though they are friendly toward one another on a special level, they still blend very. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever run into a little Tokyo? And how many of you run into a Chinatown? There's a Chinatown in every major city in America.
Yeah.
But there is not a little Tokyo in every single thing. The Japanese have a different perception of culture, a different perception of the individual's responsibility to the corporate. And when they leave Japan, their idea is they must fit in, and they must blend, and they must adapt themselves to the culture that's around them, because that is how they will succeed most. When they come from China, the tendency is for them to find other Chinese people, to isolate themselves from the general culture, and to make themselves... Now, is one right and one wrong? Not necessarily. Each one has benefits and drawbacks. I've found that the Koreans, in all the schools that I've been to, congregate together. And even though you will have individual Koreans that you can have a very good relationship with, when they are a block, they're a force to be reckoned with. They have certain ideas about how things should be, and if things are not that way, they do not adapt well or adjust well on any level. So, for instance, when I was doing my PhD, I found myself in a situation where my wife had to go to work. So I was working 3 jobs, took over the homeschooling for the kids, and my house was falling apart, and I had sleep apnea, and I was coming apart. But I had to homeschool the kids because I wasn't ready to send them to public school. Wish I'd never had. Biggest mistake I ever made in my life. There was one, if you could say, I'm going to allow you to undo one mistake in life, I would go back and undo the mistake of letting my kids go to public school. Simply because I got too exhausted to continue to do it.
So you would let them go to public school?
No, I would not.
Oh, you would not?
I would not.
Oh.
I was so exhausted and broken. I just kind of gave up on that point because something had to give. I felt like I was going to just fall over and die.
You don't think it was good for them?
It was terrible. We're absolutely.
Yeah.
Public schools are Paulo Freire schools. You ever heard of schools like Montessori schools? There's a certain educational principle of how the school is run. All the public schools in America are now Paulo Freire schools. They are Marxist training camps.
Oh, okay.
That's not a question. That's an absolute statement of fact. All teaching colleges teach according to the Paulo Freire methodology. And the Paulo Freire methodology is to shape students to be revolutionaries who burn society down. So I'm doing all this, and so I would bring them with me to school, and they would follow me around. And everybody thought it was the most wonderful thing because they were so well behaved, and everybody liked them. And I would go over there, and they would find a place to sit, and I would give them their instructions, and I would go and work. And then I would take them, and I'd put them over here, and then I'd give them their instructions, and they'd go to class. And they'd be very near me. And then I'd come out of class, and I'd put them over, I'd put them in the library, and then they would try and kick them out of the library. Well, the people that were the worst were the Koreans were always trying to get the school to kick my kids out of every single space that I tried to put my kids. Because that's not how it's supposed to go. I was not acting according to the pattern. And how could that possibly be? The pattern was all important. We are all doing this, and you're over there doing this other thing. They couldn't stand it. It was like they were having emotional breakdowns at the very witness of somebody doing something that was outside of the normal pattern of how it was supposed to be. And this is not me making fun of them. This is talking about how cultures lean heavily toward the corporate or lean heavily toward the individual, even though both have both. And each one operates on an instinctual level, not a rational level. They feel it. They know it's the right way to be. And when someone violates it, they react, not here. That's not right, that's not right, that's right, that's not right, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
So people who found out that they were trying to drive my kids off campus were infuriated. How dare you interfere with this man's individual parenting paradigm that he has adopted because he must adopt it because of his situation. Individualists. And the corporate people, oh, we're with them. Absolutely. What's wrong with this guy? What in the world is he doing bringing these kids here? You see anybody else bringing their kids here? Nobody else brings their kids here.
Sounds like a library.
Oh, yeah, the librarian was. She'd come, your children just cannot be here. And so they made a rule that nobody under the age of blah could be in the library unattended, right? And so they thought they had me. The problem is that my daughter was older than that. And so a week later, they changed the signs because they went and said, how old are you? And she said how old they were. So they made it a year older than that.
You're older than that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, again, they couldn't stand it. So Americans are decidedly heavy toward the individual, the one in a strained cooperative relationship with the many. We believe that competition, healthy competition, in which we are all pursuing the good of everybody because we believe that efficiency is its own reward, that efficiency is its greatest reward. There are other groups that do not feel this way about efficiency. They think efficiency is not a good measure for whether something works. And yet, in economics, the greatness of an economic system is the efficiency with which it uses resources. If I am efficient in making a better product, let's say the ballpoint pen. If I make a pen that is better than every other pen, I put every other pen out of business. Lots of people lose their jobs. But I've created a new industry with a new kind of pen in which lots of people find new jobs. Right? Or tariffs. So we have people that they're thinking about this competition versus the collective in the tariffs. So we're like, hey, you remember no, you don't remember. Perhaps you've read about the steel industry struggles in the 80s in Pennsylvania, where they suddenly decided they're going to put tariffs on foreign steel. Right? So if American steel, I'm going to make the numbers up. If American steel can produce steel for 10 cents a pound, but foreign steel can produce it for 5 cents a pound, then everybody wants to go buy the foreign steel, and American steel dies. It either gets efficient, but it can't get efficient because it's got unions controlling it, and they're controlling the wages, and they will not allow the wages to adjust in order to bring American steel into the realm of efficiency. So a person who's thinking about the corporate, us four and no more, us Americans, who cares about the rest of the world? They want to put a tariff on foreign steel, so that 5 cent a pound foreign steel is now 12 cents a pound. And so American companies are not allowed to buy steel for 5 cents a pound. They have to buy it for 10 cents a pound because foreign steel is 12 cents a pound. And you save the American industry. Here's the problem. You saved 10,000 jobs and cost $1 million. Because now every American product that's made with steel, everybody else in the world is building their metal products with 5 cent steel. And Americans are forced to make everything with 10 cent steel. That means our microwaves, our refrigerators, our tools, every single thing we make that's made out of metal is more expensive than it needs to be because they wanted to save these 10,000 American jobs. And so you save the steel industry in America and you lose 1 million jobs in the rest of the country. Well, individualist Americans, we believe that competition is its own reward, to be the most efficient. And if they can do a job for a penny an hour, why in the world would I pay 50 cents an hour in America? And so the jobs move over there. Now, that kind of efficiency has a way of recreating the country so that we have better jobs. We take and work at a better stage of it. Anyway, so it's part of this idea of the corporate versus the individual.
But then makes us dependent on that other country.
Yes. There's all kinds it's a very movie thing.
Yeah.
But Americans are usually convinced that competition is the best way to get the most efficiency, the best systems, and the greatest reward for everybody. The corporate tends to believe that we all huddle together and protect. So a union is a corporate concept. It's not asking what's the most efficient and best for everybody. It's asking what's the best and most temporarily advantageous to our group.
Yeah.
And it tends to foster tremendous inefficiency. And in a corporate system in which underlings are not allowed to challenge the people that are over them, you end up creating a type of narcissistic selfishness at the head. You'd like to think that if a parent is choosing a spouse for their child, that they would choose what is best for the child. But that's not the way the corporate family works. In the corporate family, the head of the family is supposed to be making choices that are good for the family. Except most of the time, what they're ultimately doing is making choices that are better for themselves. Has anyone? I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. So what you have in the movie is you have this large extended family, and there are family groups within this family, and there is the patriarch of the whole family, and he has at one time or another used his resources and his ability to get everybody jobs, to loan them the money that they need, and he applies that you owe me kind of relationship. You're in business because I loaned you the money you needed for business. So really every piece of money, all the money you ever earn is really mine. But he doesn't act that way. Not him, though I've seen that a lot. I've seen it a lot. Where the person, I'm going to do something for you. Now everything that you ever do, you really owe to me, and you never finish paying it off. The social interest that you pay to me is way more than anything that I ever gave you. All right, so what he's really doing is he's a pedophile. And he is using the influence that he has over all these people to conceal his sexual abuse of the unattended girls in the family.
Is it a movie?
Yes.
Oh.
And at one point,
Doesn't make us better.
so these girls, their father died, and the one brother took them in to be his own daughters. And this leader guy, to whom this father owed everything, he finds out that he was sexually abusing the older daughter because the older daughter catches him in a clincher with the younger daughter, and she knows, and she's not going to keep the secret anymore. And so she goes and just blows it up at a family wedding and forces the father to make a decision on whether he will stick with the corporate headship and structures and authorities and the you owe me's, or whether he will stand for the individual protections of these two weaker members of the family. I'm just trying to kind of lay a picture out for you. And so, now, your cultural background. Mexico. How is all this resonating with you?
I mean, there's like more like emphasis on family. There's like many generations in one household. Like that's kind of different than here.
So you feel an affinity, like you recognize what I'm talking about? Because you got your feet in two camps, right?
I mean, two camps.
Like you're in American society,
Yeah.
where we kind of lean one way, but
Yeah.
your family is Mexican, and you kind of lean the other way.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel it? That tension?
It's not as big. It's not that big, honestly.
It's not that doesn't feel that big.
No, it's not like that much different than from here to over there. But like, my family's very open-minded. They're not really strict. You have to be 100% Mexican. They're more open to. They know this is a new world. You're in a new place.
So they're interested in adapting.
Yeah.
Okay, which is what you would get from you would tend to get from the Japanese.
Yeah.
Adapt,
Right.
fit in. That's why you see. What do anybody ever see when the Japanese come over? What do? Put on a cowboy hat,
Yeah.
belt buckle,
You know,
learn country
right?
music, do line
Yeah.
dancing.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Like the English
Right?
guy.
Well,
The English kid from England blasting like country music, driving a
Stop.
truck.
All right, so you had some funny looks on your faces.
Oh, no.
Talk about your father, Dominican, and yet you live in America, but you're in a household, and you've got a multi-generational home, which I think is wonderful. It's one of the things about American individualism that I regret, is the idea that the breakdown of the multi-generational home, the lack of responsibility that we tend to feel for those who are older than us. I had a very powerful sense of responsibility for my parents. I had hoped with my own kids that I would have as good a relationship with them as I have with my parents, and that my parents had with their parents. And we grew up in a house in Newport where it was a big apartment building, and all the apartments were filled with family.
That's cool.
Yeah. Everybody left their doors open. So the doors to the apartment building were shut,
Yeah.
and they'd lock those at night. But individual apartments, nobody ever shut the door. In fact, I didn't even know there were doors on some of them.
That's cool.
I came in one day and found them shut, and I went, "What is that? I didn't know her door was green."
Yeah.
All right, so talk to me.
Oh, my mom wants to have a whole family compound. She wants
Yeah,
to buy. She wants to have a whole. She
Freaking
wants to
city.
buy land.
This is on
And
city,
each of
bro.
us have a house on it. Which
And how do you
I'm
feel
not-
about that?
I'm okay living next door.
Yeah, I'm cool with it.
I'm okay with living
With
next
it.
door.
Are you cool with it because you just love the idea of just being close with family? Or are you cool with it because you see a lot of financial advantages?
Both.
Yeah, definitely both
Both
for
ends.
sure.
Okay.
I love my family.
So your dad's Dominican. Where's his brain in all this?
I don't know. I feel like my dad one is very family like oriented and always trying to get somebody to come to the house. Always. Like we were supposed to have family come over today, but you know, because of the weather they didn't come.
We
So,
spent most of his time in New York, right? Like, when did you move here? Young, right?
I didn't think
Okay.
he lived in the DR that long.
No,
No,
he
he
wasn't.
was
He
in New
wasn't
York.
born in the DR.
Yeah.
His parents were, and then they moved to New York.
What about his brother?
So he's first
Which one?
generation.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Well, his
Yeah.
sister was born there.
Did any of his siblings live there?
I've met his
I
sister,
mean,
his
my
older
uncle
sister.
lives in the Dominican Republic right now,
Okay.
and then I think multiple.
How would you describe? Have you been to the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, but with like on a mission trip, I didn't see any family.
You didn't go with family?
No.
So you didn't get a sense of how the family lives.
I was supposed
or-
to meet with them, but when we
gonna
were
go.
when I was in the capital where they live, my uncle's on the other side of the island, so I didn't get to see him.
Just so we recognize, so when we, even just at the table, we're going to have some differences. I teach a class called cross-cultural communication, and I fill the room up with as many cultures as I can get in one room. And then I just pick fights with everybody.
That sounds
Just
like
throw
that.
subjects out on the table and try and get everybody to argue and to talk about why they feel the way they do it. Everybody was really polite and kind to each other. Oh, that is very interesting, because we do it a little differently. Until we got to raising children.
Oh no.
And then I thought they were going to fist fight.
Is that recorded?
We didn't talk about that when I took.
We did not record it. I wish we did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
it was
I
when we got to
I would
when we got
watch
to raising
that.
kids. I was like
What were the issues that they brought up?
that what Americans consider good parenting, corporate people from collectivist societies consider abuse, and what they consider good parenting, Americans consider abuse. Right on down to abuse.
Huh.
You abuse your children. You have broken your children.
Like, too strict or like?
What were like the
lenient?
two sides?
All right, so
Americans
before a
too
child is
lenient.
2 years old, they're either an individual. Before they're even talking, they are an individualist or collectivist based on how you raise them, based on the kinds of things you do with them in infancy. Americans, high chairs, play sets, floor their own crib, high chair at the table to learn to feed themselves. Get them their shoes as quickly as possible, to get them walking as quickly as possible. Offering them choices so that they learn to make wise choices in small things so that they can be trusted to make wise choices in bigger things. Right now it's red cup, blue cup. Other people think, no, you learn to take what you get. Right? All right, so you are training the child. So you hold the child, but you will put the child down. The child needs to learn to soothe itself to sleep. Other cultures, family bed. You will constantly hold the child. There's no floor time. There's no high chair. The child eats on your lap and eats from your plate, from your fingers. The child is never set down. It is always in the hands of family, diaper changing or training them. In collectivist cultures, the mother is frequently so often with the child and so isolated with the child that it senses when the child needs to evacuate its bowels and puts it over the space that it will evacuate its bowels into. They will consider the child potty trained. And they will drop them off in an American daycare and say, yes, my child is potty trained. And the child is peeing and pooping on everything, creating a disease problem. And when the parents are called in and said, you told us your child was potty trained, they said, well, my child is potty trained. You're obviously abusing my child and not treating my child properly. Right. The child does not learn to make any decisions for itself. In individualist cultures, we read to our kids. We try and get them reading on their own. We talk with them. So and this is not a racist thing. This is just sheer cultural identifiers. The average white child has more words spoken directly to it in a day than the average African American child has spoken to it in a week.
That's actually crazy.
Because in certain cultures, you don't speak to the child. The child sits in silence and listens to everyone around them talk. You don't talk to them, you talk around them.
Makes sense.
You
now.
dictate to them. They do what must be done. There's no decisions to be made. There's no, right? So you build this kind of dependency. So you are literally shaping the mind of the child that it is nothing more than an extension of the family, or it is a cooperative individual within a cooperative family of individuals who has choices to make, has volition, has to be trained in the wise use of volition. And before that kid can talk, it is a collectivist or an individualist. In American society, we protect the one from the many. The individual rights are the core of our entire society. Because I am image of God, every individual of every nation, of every age, of every race, of both genders, both genders, male and female, of every tongue, tribe, culture, is image of God, and as such demands to be treated with all the dignity and respect that that position carries. That's American society. Every individual has a right to life, liberty, and property. The right to parental rights, the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom to associate, the freedom to not associate. Right? And the one requirement of the individual is that they exercise those rights, demand and to protect those rights without violating the same rights in anybody else. That's the cooperative individual in a corporate whole. But it is the cooperative individual in competition with and in chosen cooperative effort with those that are around us. So you get 10 people, we come together, we agree to limit our personal rights. For instance, the right to my money. I will give up some of my rights to my money, what I earned, my crops and everything, in order to be part of a community in which we pool our resources to build roads, have security systems, do governments, militaries, so that in the long run, according to game theory, we can get further, do more. I have to give up some of my rights in order that the rights that I do have can be more productive and more efficiently managed. That's the American way of thinking about life. It's the way of thinking about. We are families, but we are also very much a part of the cooperative society. Then you have other societies in which the family is so powerful. The bond of the family is so connected that your identity is with the family. Like the bee's identity is with the hive, so the individual's identity. And if the family says, you need to marry this woman over here because this union will be advantageous for all of us, then that is what you do. Maybe you're in love with Betsy Sue, but you're not going to marry Betsy Sue because your family needs you as part of the whole to do good for the whole by making a family union with Betty Lou instead of Betsy Sue. And so as Americans, we believe that you have to protect the individual from the bullying of the many. You stand there. That the greatest minority in society is the minority of one. And if you don't believe in individual rights, then you don't believe in minority rights, because the greatest minority is the individual. When you get into Scripture, the family is the family. The father is the head of the family. He is the legal head of the family. He governs the family, and he answers to the community for the family. He has the power of life and death over his children, just as the government has the power of life and death over its individual citizens. He is held responsible and accountable to keep his family in line. That's just a radically different thing. As that headship, he's going to be a patriarch, and he's going to be making choices. He's going to be the judge in the family matters. We believe in an individual society that the individual must discipline and govern themselves, first and foremost. I govern myself. And I govern myself in such a way that I curb my behavior to keep from violating the rights that I want for myself, to keep from violating those same rights in other people. And everything comes down to the individual. A father is the idea that the father would be held responsible for the sins of a son. It's ridiculous. Or is it? Did they not just arrest? Didn't they just arrest the parents of the last school shooter? That woman who went
Did they
into.
buy them fire?
I think, yeah, but they tried to get them. They were desperate to hold, because the left is collectivist. And so they're always they always act like they're promoting the individuals, but they're actually always going after the collective. And so to break down certain protections for the individual, they want to break those down. So we have certain sayings, and I think if you look at every society, and one of the things I love to do when I sit with people from other cultures, I say, there's a couple questions I ask them. Tell me about your heroes. Who is the perfect citizen in your country?
Jesus.
Who's the perfect female? Who's the perfect male? Who's the perfect parent? What does the perfect child look like? And the second one is, tell me about some of your favorite sayings. So here's a bunch that we got for us in America. Look out for number one. Be all you can be. Every man has a destiny. Make your own way in the world. Pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. He's a self-made man. Don't let others define you. I am a unique person. Follow your heart. One of the worst pieces of advice ever pawned off in human society. For the heart is deceitful, wicked, beyond all things. Who can know it? I am special. I know I'm somebody, 'cause God don't make no junk. That was a big one when I was a kid. Posters everywhere, that little kid going, little tears rolling down his eye. I know I'm somebody, 'cause God don't make no junk. We also say, no man is an island. Marry the man, marry the family. The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. What's bred in the bones will come out in the flesh. Blood is thicker than water. All right. So now we're going to debate on these issues. Believe me, we're going to get right down into the marrow of Scripture. And we're going to look at text after text in which the implications of how the biblical world chooses versus how modern American society chooses are going to affect a gazillion texts that make us go, that's a weird way to act, that's a weird thing to say, that's a weird, So everything from Song of Solomon, and what shall we do for our sister until she comes of age? If she is a door, we will board her up until her time. And if she is a wall, we will adorn her with silver. There you go. That's odd. It's brothers taking responsibility for the sister, to monitor her behavior on whether or not she is a noble person. And what do you see, Oklahoma? Oklahoma, where the wind comes rushing down the plains. No? Don't know this one. All right. Well, one of the songs in it, I'm just a girl who can't say no. I'm in a terrible fix. What am I supposed to do? Spit in his eye? So we're always going to have to deal with this on the psychological level and the practical level. The psychological concerns the mental patterns and perceptions of the relationship between the one and the many, the individual and the group. I say psychological, but it's not rational. It's taking place in your perceptions of the nature of the world, the perceptions of the nature of who you are in the world, and how survival is to be done, how society is to be done. If one person tried to define culture as the way we do things around here, or the way of things around here. Well, that's just the way of things here. That's just the way we do it. So a missionary, I'm not going to say a friend. I will often say friend. It's really just somebody I met once, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just so friendly. Everybody I meet, 100,000 friends. Ooh. So he's in a Muslim country. One of the guys in the community gets drunk while he's away and tries to break into his house to get at his wife. And when he comes home and finds out what the man has done, his neighbors say, you have to go over to his house and beat him. This guy's a missionary. What? I can't. I'm here to represent the Lord. I'm here to preach the gospel. I'm not here to beat people up because they act inappropriately. They said, if you don't go to his house and beat him tonight, tomorrow night, I promise you 5 men in this society will decide that they're going to have at your wife. You will go beat him tonight or your wife will be raped tomorrow, I promise you. And so he went down the street, knocked on the guy's door, he opened it, he broke his nose, pounded the living crud out of him, and nobody ever bothered the preacher's wife again. Because what they view is that he, the man, is not governing his house, and is not protecting his house.
What country was this?
I don't remember. It was a Middle Eastern country.
Okay.
A lot of these guys don't tell you where they are.
Oh, okay.
They're just Middle Eastern. One of them was in another place where he's walking down the street, and he and his wife see their next door neighbors and greet them. Oh, how are you? And he speaks to the wife. Oh, very nice to see you today. An hour later, her head comes flying over the wall of their compound with a note attached to it. So you like looking at my wife? Take a good look now.
What?
Kill the
Yeah.
wife.
But we've said that it's precarious because everybody thinks a little differently about it, but very few people are actually able to articulate what they think about it and to understand that other people might think differently about it, and legitimately so. So I'm in India, and the bishop comes to me and says, we have a situation, it's a counseling situation, we'd like you to come in because the young lady involved has a lot of respect for you as a Westerner and your perception of this situation. I said, well, what's going on? She wants to move out of her in-laws' house with her husband and just go live on their own because the mother-in-law has been beating her.
Oh.
And you need to come and tell her that she needs to submit to her mother-in-law and allow herself to be reshaped and retrained according to the mother-in-law's ways. I just stared at him. Yeah, you don't want me going in there. Why? Because if I go in there, I'm going to tell the young lady and the husband, run. I'm going to turn to the mother-in-law and say, keep your hands to yourself. And he went, oh, yeah, maybe you better not come. I wrestled with the way that their families engage one another, the way the dynamics of family work. I did not see loving care and concern and the perfect sharing, which is the way the left presents collectivist culture. I saw profound selfishness that could not be challenged or unraveled. If you get two Americans and one is misbehaving and being incredibly selfish with the other, an abusive boss, an abusive worker, somebody's coming to blows, or somebody's going to get the courts involved. People do not put up with that kind of nonsense, and so you have less of it. But in cultures where the authority structures are irresistible, and your part, you as a cog in this collective machine, having no voice, no power, no right to exercise a will of your own, it can be difficult. Now, they do function, and they have functioned for thousands and thousands of years. But I think, as we're going to find in Scripture, there's a pushback to it. You got to have both, and you got to have both being very commonly recognized. So now, what we're going to have is on the terms of the psychological, it is impossible to go back into the biblical era and say with absolute certainty, this is how they thought. That's kind of tough. How can you reconstruct the exact mental processes of an ancient people who you have no access to, cannot interview? So all that you really have are phenomena. You simply have things that they did that suggest a certain mental attitude. Why was Abraham so thrilled at the promise of land that he would never see or touch? How exactly is that working? Because he was Why did this child feel this obligation toward the parent? Why did these people cry against God that it's not fair that they can't punish a son for the deeds of the father? And yet we also have God saying that he will visit the sins of the fathers onto the sons to certain generations. Well, how is that different than when he says that you shall not punish a child for the sins of the father or a father for the sins of the son? Mm-hmm. How is that different than I will visit the sins of the father? Well, that's phenomena. That's not, that we don't know exactly how that's supposed to work, so we find ourselves puzzling. But at least to become aware of the tension in order to look at the phenomena, and that's what we're going to do when we get down to it, and we'll probably finish it next week. We'll look at the actual phenomena of what's happening in Scripture and say, here's what we think is happening psychologically. Here's how we think they perceive man and society and community and family so that they behave the way that they behave, act the way that they act. Because that's all we have. They're going to suggest particular perceptions. All right. So the practical level concerns how one acts in light of the mental perceptions. How does law work? How does covenant work? How does ritual work? Where do taboos come from? The taboos are the things that are not done. They're the things that are not done. We don't do that. No, we don't do that here. We don't marry our sisters here. Incest is frowned upon very seriously in America. There are other cultures in which incest is winked at. If you get caught, it's a really big deal. But as long as it is, if you don't get caught, it didn't happen.
weird.
And there's a lot of these cultures
it's
that
not
are,
worth it.
as long as you didn't get caught, it didn't happen. But if you do get caught, the shame
That's a lot of pressure.
of being involved, yeah. So we're going to find that on the practical level, we're going to examine the society of Scripture, comparing it to our own and comparing it to some other cultures around the world, to watch how they interact in order to speculate on what they're thinking in terms of the one and the many. So how is one moved emotionally or convinced intellectually about the truth and justice in a situation based on the perceptions of the relationships of the one and the many? So, I mean, this is going to come right down to it. Why does Jesus' death on the cross have anything to do with my sin? Corporate personality. It was the great key that I was missing. I probably told you the story. So, I'm in Sunday school, and I don't get it. Why does Jesus' death on the cross save my sin? Shut up, you're rebellious. I'm not telling you I don't believe it. I'm telling you I don't get it. I don't understand it. If the Scripture says it's true, I'm willing to embrace the fact that it's true, but I don't understand it. Shut up, you're rebellious. So then years later, I'm witnessing on the street in New York City, and I'm actually talking to a prostitute, preaching the gospel to her, and she stops me and she goes, yeah, I don't get it. What in the world's Jesus' death got to do with anything to do with what I did? So he dies. Why does that kind of make anything I've done wrong in my life okay? And I went, I know, right? Yeah, I've been wondering the same thing. I don't know.
Question.
I don't know. Then I said, shut up, you're rebellious. No, I actually went back to my room, got in my bunk, and wept and prayed. Said, Lord, I want to understand the cross. And the key, the big key that I've been missing all those years is corporate personality, corporate headship. And so part of the corporate headship is going to be what we see where Achan sins and dooms his entire family, where Rahab acts righteously with the Lord and turns her entire house into a safe zone. So that anybody and everybody that stuffs themselves into it is saved from harem slaughter. Why does Noah, the one righteous man, it didn't say that there was none righteous except for Noah and his kids. Just Noah. And yet his kids are saved. His daughters-in-law, they're saved. His wife is saved because of his righteousness. That's corporate personality. But there's going to be other things too. What is the special relationship between David and Jesus being David's heir and the connection that you have there? Anyway, right on down to the ancient Near Eastern rituals in which it was expected that a Babylonian king would die on behalf of the people to expunge their sin. But of course you can't kill the king, so you put up a replacement. And you take a guy out of prison, two guys actually, crown them king for festival week. They drink a lot, they eat a lot, I guess they do whatever other stuff, and then you execute one, and I think they release the other one, like they do with the scapegoat and the thing. Wow. I think they release the other one, but they release him not into society, they exile him out of society. I have to double check that second guy on what they do with him, but the one of them they execute. Because it's him dying, because the many are embodied in the one, and the one, so the many are in the one, and the one can act on behalf of the many. To us, that's weird. It doesn't have any part of in our legal system. There's no situation in America in which my brother, the serial killer, gets released because me, the Pope, walks in and says, I'll die in his place. Are you nuts? It's not the part of the way we think about the world, or the way we think about justice. If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below, and don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can, and tell your friends to watch. Thank you.